In 2002, the Brown family vanished without a trace after meeting St. Elias Baptist Church. For nearly 2 decades, no clues surfaced until their abandoned Toyota was discovered in a remote junkyard. Inside, a cryptic tape, a child's whispered warning, and a photo of a man no one remembered. What really happened that day? And why did their car reappear 19 years later? Sunday afternoons in Durham had always carried a certain rhythm. The sun would hang low, golden and slow, stretching shadows across the narrow streets of East Durham. On that particular Sunday in May 2002, the streets bustled a bit more than usual. It was Mother's Day. At St. Elias Baptist Church, one of the oldest black churches in the region, the air was thick with a mingling of perfume, pressed suits, and the rich aroma of fried chicken drifting from the fellowship hall. Families gathered in pews worn soft by generations of faithful. Denise Brown adjusted the collar of her pale yellow dress as her daughter Sammy tugged impatiently at her sleeve. "Mama, can we go now?" Sammy whispered, her dark eyes wide and eager. Charles Brown, a broad-shouldered man with the calm voice of a Sunday school teacher, leaned over and kissed his daughter's forehead. "One more hymn, baby girl," he said. Beside him, Jordan, barely 5, was already drifting toward sleep against his father's side. Denise smiled faintly. This had been her favorite day of the year growing up. Now, as a mother of 2, it carried a bittersweet weight. After service, they planned to visit Charles's mother in Burlington, a short drive west. But first, there was peach cobbler to deliver to Denise's sister, Maria, just a few blocks away. They had promised. Pastor Rayburn's voice echoed warmly through the sanctuary. "Let us remember the mothers we hold dear, here and beyond." The choir launched into "His Eye is on the Sparrow," voices rising in a slow, trembling wave. The Browns stood, swaying gently. Denise pressed her palm against Charles's as they sang. The clock above the pulpit read 3:42 p.m. When the service ended at 4:10 p.m., families trickled out beneath the crisp blue sky. The church lot buzzed with laughter and car doors slamming shut. The Browns lingered, chatting with an older couple they'd known for years. "Y'all drive safe now," Mrs. Tate called out as the Browns made their way toward their Toyota Camry parked beneath a wide pecana tree. Sammy skipped ahead, her patent leather shoes scuffing the gravel. Jordan toddled behind, clutching his toy race car. Charles opened the driver's door, glancing back once toward the church steps where Pastor Rayburn stood, waving at departing congratulants. Denise folded her peach cobbler neatly into the back seat. "All right, let's get going," Charles said, buckling Jordan into his car seat. Sammy climbed in, swinging her legs excitedly. Denise slid into the passenger seat and adjusted the rearview mirror. It caught her own eyes, momentarily tired, but content. Charles started the engine. A faint gospel tune floated from the radio. They pulled out a lot at 4:18 p.m., the last sighting anyone would confirm. Maria waited at home, a fresh pot of coffee brewing. By 5:30 p.m., she began to worry. The cobbler was a family staple. Charles and Denise never missed such a promise. Calls to both their cell phones went unanswered. By nightfall, the anxiety sharpened. Maria called local police at 9:42 p.m., filing a missing persons report. The Browns' home showed no sign of entry or disturbance. Their car was gone. No witnesses reported seeing them after they left St. Elias. That evening, a storm swept through Durham. Heavy rain washed the streets clean, erasing what little might have remained. In the following days, search parties canvassed the nearby Eno River and wooded trails. Volunteers, many from the congregation, scoured backroads and abandoned lots. Nothing. The Toyota Camry, a 1995 model with a dent on the driver's side door, never surfaced. Denise's cell signal was last traced to a tower south of town, but triangulation proved inconclusive. Surveillance footage from nearby intersections offered no leads. Charles's ATM card was never used again. The Browns had vanished, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Rumors blossomed in the void. Some whispered that Charles might have been involved in something shady. Others speculated about foul play, abduction, even voluntary disappearance. But those who knew them best dismissed such notions. Charles loved his kids more than life, Pastor Rayburn told reporters, and Denise, she was devoted to her family. They wouldn't have just left fall bloody news. Flyers yellowed and curled on telephone poles. Each anniversary, Maria lit a candle in her window, hoping. And so the story settled into the shadows of the community's collective memory, a lingering ache, an unanswered prayer. No one could have imagined that 19 years later, a single chance discovery would pull that old wound wide open again. But for now, on that quiet Sunday in May 2002, the Browns drove west beneath a lowering sun, their laughter trailing faintly behind them, a family of 4 on an ordinary afternoon that would become anything but. Jordan Brown never stopped looking. Not really. Not even when the years stacked up like brittle pages in an old ledger. Not when the news stations stopped calling. Not when the flyers disappeared from shop windows and church doors. Not even when his own voice had cracked and deepened, transforming from the frightened 5-year-old who'd been left behind into a determined young man carrying the weight of his family's absence like a second skin. It was the spring of 2021, his final year at North Carolina Central University. The pandemic had kept most students off campus, but Jordan preferred being alone these days. Solitude gave him space to think, to search. Between classes and part-time shifts at a local coffee shop, he spent hours combing online auction sites, junkyard listings, even cold case forums where strangers posted fragments of lost stories in hopes someone, somewhere, would care enough to piece them together. That's how he found it. A grainy photograph on an obscure salvage yard's website. A 1995 Toyota Camry, color listed as unknown, condition for parts. The listing had no VIN number, just a hand-scrawled note beneath the image. No title, abandoned vehicle, $400, 0 cents OBO. The photo was low-res, but Jordan's pulse quickened when he leaned closer. The driver's side door bore a shallow dent, right where his father's Camry had been struck during a grocery store fender bender in 2001. It could be coincidence. Many cars got banged up that way, but his gut said otherwise. He'd seen that dent in every family picture taken during the year before the disappearances, his mother chiding his father for putting off repairs. The salvage yard sat 40 miles southeast of Durham, tucked near an old textile mill in the dying town of Ellerby. On a muggy Thursday afternoon between classes, Jordan made the drive alone, heart pounding a steady rhythm beneath his ribcage. The lot was a sprawling maze of rusted metal and sun-bleached hulks, weeds threading up through shattered windshields. The office, a sagging trailer that smelled of mildew and motor oil, was manned by a leathery man named Chet, who barely glanced at Jordan as he handed over $40 for temporary yard access. "Row 7, Chet said, jerking his thumb toward a sagging chain-link gate. The deeper he walked, the quieter the world became, sounds of the nearby highway fading beneath the rustle of weeds and the distant hum of cicadas. He found the Camry in the far corner of the lot, half sunken in soft earth, its once-tan paint faded to a dull bone gray beneath layers of grime. The pecan-shaped dent still marred the driver's door. The windshield was intact, though spiderwebbed with age. The tires had long since deflated, rims biting into soil. Jordan stood frozen for a moment, throat tight. After 19 years, here it was, the missing link, the vessel of his family's last known moments. He approached slowly, hands trembling as he brushed debris from the driver's side window and peered inside. The cabin was a tomb. Dust coated the dashboard like ancient parchment. The front seats were sunken and cracked. The air smelled of mildew, rust, and something fainter. Old perfume? His mother's, maybe? He tested the driver's door handle. Locked. Circling the car, he found the passenger door ajar by a hair, hinges groaning as he forced it open. The smell intensified, a sickly sweet mix of damp fabric and aged paper. The glove compartment hung open, empty save for a brittle parking receipt dated May 12, 2002, Mother's Day. Jordan's breath caught. Proof. He wasn't imagining this. This was their car. His family's car. With shaking fingers, he unlatched the trunk. The hydraulic arms hissed, resisting, then gave way with a groan. Inside lay a jumble of debris. An old picnic blanket, a child's flip-flop, hardened with age. Beneath the blanket something caught his eye. A slim, leather-bound Bible, edges curled from damp. He lifted it reverently, heart hammering. It was his mother's Bible. He recognized the gold-embossed initials, D.A.B. For Denise Ann Brown, still faintly visible on the cover, His vision blurred as he opened it to the front page. In the familiar looping script of his mother's hand was her name, address, and beneath it a single line scrawled in what looked like a hurried, trembling hand. He never let go. The ink bled at the edges, as if written in desperation. Jordan sank to his knees beside the open trunk, clutching the Bible to his chest. 1,000 images flooded his mind, his mother's warm laugh, his father's deep voice. Sammy's gap-toothed grin. Tears streamed down his cheeks, unchecked. They had been here, not just the car, his family. Something had happened, something that had left this message behind. He scanned the rest of the trunk. No bones, no blood, no obvious signs of violence, just abandoned belongings preserved in this rusting sarcophagus beneath years of rain and sun. Swallowing hard, Jordan retrieved his phone and began snapping photos, every angle of the car, the trunk contents, the Bible's inscription. His mind spun with questions. Why had the car surfaced here, so far from Durham? Why now? Who had driven it here, and why had no one traced it sooner? And most chilling of all, what did that message mean? Who was he, and what had he never let go of? Jordan's phone buzzed, jerking him from his thoughts. A text from Maria. "Been thinking of you?" He stared at the screen, fingers poised to reply, then lowered the phone. Not yet, not until he had answers. Pocketing the Bible, Jordan rose slowly and scanned the lot, eyes narrowing. Chet had said the car was ready for crushing. Someone wanted it gone. Someone wanted this chapter closed. But Jordan wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. Not until he unearthed whatever truth had been buried with that car. He took one last photo of the open trunk, heart hammering. Then, gathering his resolve, he turned back toward the lot's entrance, the leather-bound Bible pressed tight against his ribs. He didn't see the shadow that shifted behind a rusted pickup 3 rows away. He didn't hear the faint click of a lighter flicking to life, or the voice that murmured low and amused, "He came, just like we knew he would." But he would, soon enough. The leather-bound Bible burned against Jordan's chest as he made his way back to the Camry. The weight of the discovery had left him reeling, but instinct drove him onward. He couldn't walk away now, not with the scent of his family lingering in the air, not with questions stacking higher than his breath could steady. He pushed the passenger door open wider, the hinges shrieking in protest. The musty interior seemed to breathe him in, dust motes swirling through a shaft of light. His gaze swept the front seat, every crack and crevice a possible vessel of truth. That's when he saw it, half buried beneath a crumpled sun visor on the passenger seat. A black Sony Walkman, scuffed and worn, its buttons dulled from use. A cassette sat inside, the clear window revealing the spooled brown tape. Jordan reached for it with trembling fingers, flipping the device over. A faded label read only. His throat tightened. The date of their disappearances. Swallowing hard, he ejected the cassette, inspecting the tape for damage. Despite its age, it appeared intact. Glancing around the lot to ensure he was alone, Jordan crouched in the passenger seat and fished a pair of battered headphones from the glove compartment, forgotten relics that might just bridge the gap between past and present. He pressed play. At first, only static hissed through the earpieces. He adjusted the volume, heart hammering in time with the faint mechanical whir. Then, beneath the white noise, a voice, a small, familiar voice. Sammy. His sister. Her words emerged, faint but distinct, whispered and urgent. "Don't let him open the door." The tape crackled, the sentence repeating once more, "Don't let him open the door." Jordan's vision blurred, his chest constricted. He could almost see her, 9 years old, gap-chalked and brave, speaking into the recorder with the kind of fear only children can hide. But who was she warning? Who was trying to open the door? The tape devolved back into static, no further words surfacing. Jordan rewound it and played it again, but the message remained the same, short, terrified, unfinished. Carefully, he pocketed the cassette and Walkman. He couldn't risk leaving them here. A bead of sweat traced his temple. There was more to uncover. He scanned the dashboard, eyes catching on the glove box hanging ajar. Kneeling across the passenger seat, he reached inside, fingers brushing brittle paper and debris. Then something solid, a small spiral-bound notebook, its navy-brown stained cover faded and water-stained. He drew it out, heart racing. The front bore his mother's initials, DAP, scribbled faintly in black ink. Jordan opened it gingerly. The first pages held mundane notes, grocery lists, Jordan's kindergarten schedule, reminders about church events. Then the tone shifted. Midway through, the handwriting grew tighter, more frantic. One entry caught his eye. April 21, saw him again today, standing by the tree line after service, tall, thin, wearing that same hat. No one else seems to notice. Asked Charles. He hadn't seen anyone. Jordan swallowed, flipping to the next entry. April 28, Sammy said the man waved at her. Told her not to tell. She told me anyway. I told her to stay away. But I can't shake this feeling. His fingers trembled as he turned another page. May 5. He was closer today. Stood near the back of the lot. No one else saw. Pastor Rayburn looked confused when I asked if he noticed a visitor. I'm not imagining this. Jordan's stomach knotted. The entries continued sporadically, each one thick with unease. The last dated May 12, the day they vanished. He was near the car this time. I almost didn't leave, but Charles said we couldn't live in fear. Maybe we should have. If anything happens, please know I tried. He's not part of the church. I don't know what he wants. The page ended abruptly, as if she'd been interrupted later. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of a puzzle long buried. A man no one else remembered, a presence his mother feared. A warning from Sammy, preserved in fragile magnetic tape. And now the car, hidden for nearly 2 decades, suddenly unearthed. Who had brought it here? Why now? Who was the man with the hat, and what had he done to the Browns? Jordan's pulse thundered in his ears. He needed to get these items out, analyze them somewhere safe. As he gathered the notebook, cassette, and Bible, his gaze flicked once more across the interior. Something shimmered faintly beneath the passenger seat. He reached down, fingers brushing cold metal. A key, old and tarnished, with a warm plastic tag attached, property of St. Elias Baptist Church. Jordan's breath caught. The church. His heart pounded anew. Whatever had begun that day had threads still tangled with the place they'd trusted most. Carefully, he slid the key into his pocket, chest tight with a rising tide of dread. He glanced around the lot once more, a sudden awareness prickling the back of his neck. The shadows between the wrecked cars seemed deeper now, heavier. He wasn't alone here. Somewhere beyond the tangled maze of rusted metal, unseen eyes watched. Jordan swallowed his fear and forced himself to move, stepping from the car and locking the passenger door behind him. His grip tightened on the items in his arms. He had what he came for, but the truth was no closer, only deeper, darker. And somewhere in the folds of memory and metal, the echo of Sammy's voice clung to the air. Don't let him open the door. Jordan's mind churned as he drove away from the salvage yard, the Walkman, cassette, notebook, and Bible secured in his backpack. The weight of the discoveries pressed on him with suffocating urgency, each revelation pulling him deeper into a mystery that had shaped his life yet remained maddeningly incomplete. He parked outside his apartment and spread the items across his small kitchen table, snapping photos, cataloging every scrap of information. The notebook entries haunted him the most. His mother's growing fear, the unknown man in the hat, and Sammy's desperate plea captured on tape. He needed more. He needed context. The notebook's final pages referenced dates and locations that sent him diving into online archives and dusty library microfilms. But it was a different detail that drew his eye. A faded oil change receipt tucked between the last 2 pages of the notebook. Printed in smeared ink, it bore the logo of J&M Auto Repair, dated May 9, 2002, 3 days before the family vanished. The address led to a shuttered garage on the outskirts of Durham. A quick search revealed that J&M had been raided in 2003 as part of a larger sting targeting stolen vehicle rings operating across the Carolinas. The investigation had abruptly closed without explanation. No charges filed, no public record of why. Jordan frowned, heart pounding. The receipt meant the Camry had been serviced at this garage mere days before his family disappeared. If the car had been moved or manipulated, this place might hold the missing link. By late afternoon, he found himself driving the cracked, winding road toward the old industrial park where J&M once operated. The building loomed at the end of a dead-end street, its rusted sign swinging in the wind. Weeds choked the perimeter, graffiti scars marred the brick facade. Jordan parked nearby, glancing around. The street was deserted. He approached cautiously, slipping through a gap in the bent chain-link fence. The front door hung ajar, its lock long since broken. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil residue. Discarded tires and rusted tools littered the floor. The faint scent of gasoline lingered beneath layers of decay. Jordan's flashlight cut through the gloom, illuminating stacks of moldy paperwork, empty file cabinets, and broken equipment. He moved carefully, scanning for anything that might tie the garage to his family's car. In a back office, a battered metal filing cabinet caught his eye. The drawers screeched in protest as he tugged them open. Most held nothing but mouse nests and crumpling invoices. But the bottom drawer stuck half. With a grunt, Jordan forced it loose, revealing a warped accordion folder wedged in the back. He eased it out, heart racing. The folder contained a jumble of faded photographs, shop receipts, and scribbled notes. His breath caught as he flipped through them. Toward the middle of the stack, a Polaroid slipped free and fluttered to the floor. Jordan knelt, fingers trembling as he picked it up. The image showed a familiar figure, his mother, Denise, seated in the driver's seat of the Camry. She wore the same yellow dress from Mother's Day, her hands resting tensely on the wheel. Her expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between determination and dread. But it was the background that froze Jordan in place. Standing just behind the open driver's door, partially obscured by shadow, was a tall man wearing a dark trench coat and a wide-brimmed fedora. The angle of the shot conveniently cut off the man's face. Whether by accident or design, Jordan couldn't tell. But the sight of that hat sent a cold wave through his chest. His mother had described this man, Sammy had feared this man. And here he was, captured in a photograph buried in the ruins of a garage connected to stolen vehicles and closed investigations. Jordan turned the photo over. No date, no notes, but the Polaroid stock matched those popular in the early 2000s. His pulse hammered in his ears. How had this picture ended up here? Who had taken it? And why had no one uncovered it during the original investigation? His gaze swept the rest of the folder, searching for more. Among the disjointed papers, he found another receipt, this one for storage fees paid in cash to Midtown Storage, dated June 2002. The storage unit number was circled in red ink. Jordan snapped a quick photo of the receipt before tucking it into his backpack, along with the Polaroid. His heart thudded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The threads were tangling, overlapping in ways that suggested deliberate concealment. Someone had moved the Camry. Someone had kept parts of this story buried, first through the garage, then through storage. And now that someone might be watching again. A sudden noise, a faint metallic clatter echoed from the far end of the garage. Jordan froze, breath caught in his throat. He killed his flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. Ears straining, he heard only silence. No voices, no footsteps, but the air felt heavier, charged. Clutching the folder, he edged toward the exit, each step measured and silent. Outside the daylight seemed sharper, colder. He cast a wary glance around the lot before slipping back through the fence to his car. As he drove away, the Polaroid lay face up on the passenger seat, the faceless man's shadowed figure seeming to watch him still. Questions swirled in his mind. Why had this garage been tied to the car? Who had paid for storage weeks after the Browns vanished? And most chilling of all was the man in the hat, still out there, watching, waiting. Jordan drove through the fading light, the Polaroid on the passenger seat like an accusation he couldn't silence. His mother's face haunted him, caught in that moment of fearful poise, the shadowed figure looming behind her. The threads of this nightmare were no longer theoretical. They were tangible, and they pointed towards something deliberate, orchestrated, and still unfinished. When he got home, Jordan spread everything out on his living room floor. The notebook, the Polaroid, the storage receipt, and the cassette. He played the recording again, Sammy's whisper chilling him to the bone, then scoured his mother's notes for any overlooked details. One name kept recurring in the margins, Mrs. V. Harmon. Frowned. He remembered Mrs. Harmon vaguely, an elderly woman who always sat in the second pew, wide-brimmed hats and soft-spoken prayers. Her house had a white porch that faced the church parking lot. If anyone had seen something that day, perhaps it was her. The next morning drove to the old neighborhood. The church stood largely unchanged, though its congregation had dwindled in the years since the Browns' disappearing. Weeds curled at the edges of the lot, and the paint on the doors was cracked with age. Mrs. Harmon's house still stood across the street, its porch swing creaking softly in the breeze. Gathering his nerve, Jordan approached and knocked. After a long pause, the door opened a crack. Harmon peered out, her eyes sharp despite the years etched into her face. "Yes?" Jordan swallowed. "Mrs. Harmon, my name is Jordan Brown. My family used to attend St. Elias. I believe you knew my mother, Denise." Recognition flickered in her gaze. She opened the door wider. "I remember. You're her boy?" she said softly. "Come in, child." Inside, the house smelled of lavender and old wood. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the room. They sat at a small kitchen table, tea steeping between them. Jordan explained his search, the discoveries he had made. Mrs. Harmon listened intently, her fingers curled around her teacup. When he mentioned the Polaroid and the man in the hat, her expression darkened. "I saw something that day," she said at last, voice low, "but I never told anyone. I didn't think it mattered. I wasn't sure I could trust what I'd seen." Jordan leaned forward. "Please, anything you remember." She sighed. "After service, I was sitting on my porch, same as always. I saw your family getting into the car. They looked normal, no sign of trouble. But as they drove out of the lot, they turned right." She paused. "That road's been closed since '98. Landslide made it unsafe. There's even a barrier." Jordan frowned. "You saw them drive past the barrier?" Mrs. Harmon nodded. "I did. The barrier was moved aside." "Your father?" She hesitated. "I thought it was your father driving, but when the car slowed at the turn, I caught a glimpse of the driver through the windshield. It wasn't Charles." Her eyes met Jordan's. "It was a young white man. Maybe 30, short hair. I'd never seen him before." Jordan's heart pounded. "You're sure?" "Positive." Her gaze didn't waver. "I remember thinking, why would a stranger be driving their car? But I didn't call anyone. Thought maybe I was mistaken." Jordan's mind reeled. His mother's notes, the Polaroid, Sammy's recording, all pointed to a presence his family had feared. Now an eyewitness confirmed that someone else had been behind the wheel, but the questions multiplied. How had this man taken control of the car? Where had he taken his family? Jordan thanked Mrs. Harmon and promised to keep her updated. As he left, she touched his arm. "Be careful, child," she said. "Some things are better left buried." He wasn't sure if it was a warning or a plea. Back in his car, Jordan's resolve hardened. He needed to verify Mrs. Harmon's account. The church had installed security cameras in 2001 after a series of break-ins. If any footage from that day survived, it might hold answers. He drove to St. Elias, nerves taut. The current pastor, Reverend Coleman, greeted him at the door. A kind man who had taken over years after the Browns vanished. He listened carefully to Jordan's request. "We do have old tapes," he said, "though most are degraded. You're welcome to look." In the dusty church office, Jordan combed through a stack of VHS tapes labeled by date. His breath caught when he found one marked May 12, 2002, parking lot cam. With trembling fingers, he loaded it into the aging VCR. Static filled the screen, then flickered into grainy black and white footage of the church lot. The timestamp read 4:16 p.m. The familiar image of the Camry came into view, pulling out of its space beneath the pecan tree. Jordan leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. The car turned toward the lot's exit, slowing as it approached the road. The driver came into view, a young white man, short-haired, wearing a dark jacket. Jordan's breath seized. It wasn't his father. It wasn't anyone he recognized. The Harmon had described. The screen flickered, the image degrading into static as the car disappeared from frame. Jordan replayed the segment again and again, every detail burned into his memory. There it was, proof that someone else had driven the car that day. But who was this man, and why had no one noticed him before? Reverend Coleman returned, this time his eyes more than I expected. The questions swirled faster now. The man in the Polaroid, the driver in the footage, the road that should have been impassable, pieces of a puzzle that seemed designed to evade assembly. But Jordan wasn't done searching, not yet, not with the scent of truth so close, not with the shadows that still whispered his family's name. The grainy footage from the church security camera played over and over in Jordan's mind as he drove home. Every flickering frame burned into memory. The sight of the Camry turning toward the closed road, piloted by a stranger, had shaken him to his core. His father's absence behind the wheel raised more questions than it answered. But one thing was certain now: his family hadn't simply driven off into obscurity. Something had intervened. Something deliberate. The drive back to his apartment felt like moving through molasses. The sun dipped lower in the sky, shadows lengthening across the cracked pavement. Jordan gripped the steering wheel tighter, mind racing. There had to be more in that car, details overlooked, fragments that could fill the widening gaps in the timeline. He had left the Camry reluctantly, afraid someone might remove it before he returned, but he'd convinced Chet to let him back into the salvage yard early the next morning. By dawn, Jordan stood again before the rusted shell of his family's car. The air hung heavy with dew, every breath tasting faintly of iron and earth. Determined, he opened the passenger door and knelt inside, flashlight cutting through the gloom. His mother's notebook, the Polaroid, and the Walkman had already been secured, but the car still held secrets. Beneath the passenger seat, wedged between the frame and torn carpet, something metallic caught his beam. Jordan reached in, fingers scraping rust and grit, and pulled out a small digital watch, a black Casio model, the same kind his father wore religiously. The band was cracked with age, the face scratched, but the screen still faintly glowed. He held it close. The time displayed was frozen, 4:18 p.m. His heart skipped. That was the exact time the Camry had pulled out of the church lot in the footage. But according to Mrs. Harmon and the tamp stamp on the church, Jordan turned the watch over, inspecting it for damage, but aside from a cracked edge on the band, it appeared intact. He switched it off, then on again. The display flickered once, but remained frozen. Something had caused it to stop at that precise moment. His mind reeled. If the watch belonged to his father, and it had stopped exactly as the car was leaving under someone else's control, what did that imply? Had Charles been separated from the family by then? Had something violent occurred inside the car? The questions gnawed at him, their answers elusive. Refusing to be deterred, Jordan continued his search. He crawled into the back seat, flash going flaring every inch. Amid crushed upholstery and moldering floor mats, his beam struck a plastic bag wedged beneath the driver's seat. He eased it out, heart hammering. A fast food bag, yellowed with age but still recognizable. Burger Stop, a small chain located 5 minutes from the church. Hands trembling, he unfolded the grease-stained macaron sandwich. He re-stamped it a sandwich, and confused with time and a receipt curled like an ancient scroll. He flattened it gently against the dash, eyes scanning the faded ink. The date read May 12, 2002. The time of purchase, 4:09 p.m. Jordan's breath caught. This changed everything. The receipt proved the family had stopped at Burger Stop after leaving the church lot, still alive at 4:09 p.m., well after service had ended. The timeline shifted. They had not been taken immediately. They had driven, made a purchase, interacted with someone. His mind raced. Why had no one uncovered this before? Had the car been searched so poorly, or had this evidence been intentionally overlooked? The implications were staggering. If his family had been alive and mobile after the church service, then the man seen driving the car must have taken control shortly thereafter. But where, when, and why? He pocketed the watch and the receipt, snapping photos for backup. Each new piece pulled the narrative tighter, a noose around questions that demanded answers. His next move became clear. He needed to visit Burger Stop. If any records or witnesses remained, they might hold critical details. By mid-morning, Jordan stood before the small, red-brick diner nestled off a quiet road near the church. Time had changed little. Its neon sign still buzzed faintly, sun-bleached menus plastered to the windows. He entered, the familiar scent of fried food and burnt coffee washing over him. Behind the counter, a gray-hailed woman greeted him with a polite nod. "Can I help you?" Jordan hesitated, then pulled out his phone, displaying a scan of the old receipt. "I know this is a long shot," he began, "but this receipt is from May 12, 2002. My family disappeared that day. This was their last known stop." The woman's eyes widened, her gaze flicking between him and the phone. "The Browns," she whispered. "I remember." Jordan's heart lurched. "You do?" She nodded slowly. "I was working that shift. Mother's Day was always busy. They came through, your mama, your daddy, the two little ones. They looked tired, like they'd had a long day. I remember your sister asking for extra ketchup." Jordan swallowed hard. "Did you see anyone else? Anyone strange?" The woman frowned, thinking. "There is a man. Came in just after them. Didn't order. Sat near the window watching. Wore a hat, a fedora, I think. Made the hair on my neck stand up. Did he leave with them?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I went in back to restock. When I came out, they were gone. The man, too." His mind spun. The man in the hat had been there tracking them, the pieces aligned in chilling precision. He thanked the woman, leaving his contact information, and stepped outside, the air suddenly too thin. The watch, the receipt, the witness account all pointed to a narrow window of time in which his family had slipped from the familiar into the unknown. Now the path forward was clearer than ever. He had to follow it, wherever it led. The revelation at Burger Stop had rattled Jordan more than he wanted to admit. Knowing his family had been alive after leaving the church, knowing they'd stopped for food and had been watched, it sharpened the edges of this mystery into something predatory, calculated. And now, the narrow window of time between 4:09 p.m. and 4:18 p.m. had become more critical than ever. Someone had intervened during that sliver of time, and the man in the fedora had been no passive observer. He had moved quickly and deliberately. Jordan needed to understand the full scope of the original investigation. Whatever had been missed or buried in 2002 and the years that followed, he had to find it. Early the next morning, he made his way to the Durham Police Department archives, a squat municipal building tucked behind the main precinct. Inside, a receptionist directed him to the records division. After a brief wait, an archivist named Linda, a kind, middle-aged woman with a skeptical glance, greeted him. "You're Denise Brown's son, aren't you?" she asked softly. "Word's gotten around." Jordan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I need to see all files related to the Brown disappearance. Full investigative reports, supplemental notes, anything." Linda sighed. "We've had requests before, mostly from journalists, but most of it's public now. Digital archives, the rest in long-term storage." Jordan pressed. "I'd like to see the originals." She hesitated. "I'll pull what we have." An hour later, Jordan sat in a cold conference room, a laptop before him, and a thin manila folder of printed documents. The digital files were sparse: initial missing persons report, volunteer search logs, a few faded interview transcripts, no forensic reports, no detailed analysis of the Camry or recovered belongings. Frustrated, Jordan leaned closer. One document caught his eye, a log note referencing a 2003 supplement report filed under Case 20031476. The note indicated it contained information about a recovered vehicle matching the Camry's description. Yet when he searched the database, the report was nowhere to be found. Frowning, Jordan returned to Linda. "This case number," he said, pointing. "It's referenced here, but there's no digital record." She squinted at the number. "That's odd. Everything from 2003 should have been digitized by now. Let me check." She vanished into the back, leaving Jordan's heart pounding. 10 minutes later, she returned, her expression tight. "I checked the main server and the physical index. There's no sign of that report." "What do you mean?" Charlie demanded. "It was filed. There's a reference." Linda looked uncomfortable. "Some things slip through the cracks, especially older cases. I can request a deeper search, but it could feel it in his bones." This wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate. Someone had scrubbed that file. As he gathered his things, Linda hesitated. "If you really want answers," she said quietly, "you should talk to Al Thompson. He retired years ago. Worked that case. He's sharp, keeps things others miss." Jordan thanked her and left, adrenaline surging. He found Thompson's address through a local retirees directory. The man lived in a modest ranch house on the edge of town. Late that afternoon, Jordan knocked on his door. It creaked open to reveal a tall, wiry man in his 70s, gray hair cropped short, sharp eyes, assessing him. "Detective Thompson?" Jordan asked. "I'm Jordan Brown. I'm trying to understand what happened to my family." Thompson's gaze softened. "I figured someone would come one day. he said. "Come in." They sat in a dim living room, dusty sunlight filtering through heavy curtains. Jordan laid out what he'd found: the Polaroid, the tape, the burger stop receipt. Thompson listened without interruption, his face grave. When Jordan mentioned the missing 2003 report, something flickered in the older man's eyes. "I remember that report," Thompson said slowly, "because I wrote it." Jordan's breath caught. "You did?" He nodded. "In March 2003, we got a tip. A long-haul trucker reported seeing a Camry matching your family's car parked behind an old freight depot on Mason Street. Used to be a truck staging area. We found the car, staging area, just the car, locked." "What happened?" Jordan pressed. "I filed my report, detailed everything, photos, witness statement, the lot. But 2 days later, my supervisor told me to stand down. The file was pulled. When I checked the archive later, it was gone." His voice hardened. "That's not normal, son. Files don't just vanish." Jordan's pulse thundered. "Who gave that order?" Thompson shook his head. "I was never told, just that the case had moved up the chain. I asked questions, too many. They pushed me out soon after. Early retirement." The weight of those words settled over Jordan like a lead blanket. His family's case had been deliberately buried. Someone high up had ensured certain facts never saw daylight. The depot had security cameras. We pulled the footage. Only 2 frames were clear. One showed your family's car pulling in around 4:22 p.m. The other, 10 minutes later, showed a man, white, mid-30s, wearing a fedora, walking away from the lot. Alone. George's stomach clenched. The man again. The same figure from the Polaroid, the same one who had driven the Camry away from St. Elias. "Did anyone identify him?" "No," Thompson said, "but I know what I saw, and someone didn't want that on the record." Jordan sat back, mind spinning. The timeline was clearer now. His family had left the church, stopped for food, been followed. They'd been taken, or forced, to that freight depot, and from there the trail had been deliberately obscured. But now, with the knowledge of the depot and its significance, he had a new lead. The past wasn't done whispering, and neither was he. The freight depot revelation consumed Jordan's thoughts as he drove home, mind spiraling through a vortex of time-stamped details, missing footage, and the spectral presence of the man in the fedora. His father's watch, frozen at 4:18 p.m., now resonated with terrifying clarity. The moment their control over their fate had been severed. Yet it was the fact that a report had been buried, erased from the official record, that gnawed at him most. Whoever had orchestrated this wasn't just a predator. They had influence, reach. And that meant they weren't working alone. Restless, unable to sleep, Jordan turned again to the growing stack of files and newspaper clippings on his bedroom wall. Threads of red string connected dates, times, names, an attempt to impose order on chaos. In the dim glow of his desk lamp, a headlamp caught his eye. Local woman and son missing, last seen near St. The date leapt off the page, May 5, 2002, exactly 1 week before his family vanished. The name was Camille Turner, age 28, a single mother. Her son, Mason Turner, had just turned 2. The article reported that Camille had been a member of St. Elias Baptist Church, lived in a small rental house adjacent to the church's north lot, and was last seen leaving the evening service with Mason. Neither had been seen since. Jordan's pulse quickened. He scanned the article again. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Same neighborhood, same church, same abrupt disappearance. He dug deeper, accessing the public archives. Camille's case had received only passing media attention. No witnesses, no known enemies, no leads. But a brief note in the police report mentioned her vehicle, a 1995 Toyota Camry. The same make, model, and year as his family's car. Jordan leaned back, heart racing. 2 families, 2 identical cars, 2 vanishings, a week apart. Coincidence seemed less likely by the second. A deeper search brought him to a more recent article from 2016, a small blurb buried in the local paper's police blotter. Abandoned vehicle recovered, matches missing Turner case. The article described how Camille's Camry had been discovered in a private salvage yard near Raleigh, its appearance unexplained, no official record of it having been processed through impound or reported abandoned. The vehicle had been stripped of plates and identifying decals, but the VIN matched. No forensic evidence had been recovered, no prints, no blood. The car was returned to police custody and promptly archived. No follow-up appeared in the public record. Jordan's mind reeled. Camille's car had vanished in 2002, only to resurface 14 years later without explanation, just as his family's car had reappeared now. The pattern was undeniable. He jotted connections furiously in his notebook. Camille Turner, May 5, 2002. Denise Brown, May 12, 2002. Same church, same model car, same pattern of disappearances. Both cars reappear years later, unaccounted for. The implications chilled him. If these events were connected, and they had to be, then his family hadn't been the first target. Camille had preceded them by exactly 1 week. He needed to know more. He needed to know who Camille was, who her son was, and why they had vanished. A public record search revealed that Camille had rented her house from a landlord named Marcus Green. With trembling fingers, Jordan found a listing for Green, still living in Durham. Early the next morning, he drove to Green's modest bungalow on the city's south side. The older man answered the door with wary eyes, a cigarette burning between his fingers. "I'm not selling anything," he grumbled. "I'm not here for that," Jordan said quickly. "I'm looking into the disappearance of Camille Turner. I'm Denise Brown's son." Green's expression shifted, hardening. "I remember Camille, sweet girl, loved that boy of hers. Damn shame what happened." Jordan stepped closer. "Do you remember anything about the day she vanished?" Green sighed. "She paid her rent on the 5th, said she'd see me at church that Sunday. Never showed. Cops came around asking questions. I told them all I knew." Jordan hesitated. "Her car, did you ever see it after she disappeared?" Green's brow furrowed. "Funny you ask. About a week after she vanished, I saw her car parked behind the church one night. Thought maybe she was back, but next morning it was gone. Told the cops. They didn't seem interested." Jordan's pulse thundered. "Did anyone else mention seeing it?" "No one I heard. But that church lot had cameras, didn't it?" Jordan's throat tightened. The church cameras had captured the Camry leaving with the man in the fedora. If Camille's car had also vanished from that lot, perhaps it had been taken the same way. And if Camille had been the first victim, then his family had been next. Chosen, stalked, abducted. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through him. Green eyed him closely. "You be careful, son. Some folks round here, they remember things they ain't supposed to. Don't end up like her." Jordan thanked him and left, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had to see Camille's car. If it had been processed, archived, perhaps there was straight to the Durham impound lot. A weary clerk looked up as he entered. "Looking for a car?" "I need to access vehicle T23491, Camille Turner's car, recovered in 2016. The clerk frowned, typing slowly. "Hold on." Minutes passed, the silence stretching taut. Finally, he looked up. "That car's not here. Transferred to state storage in Raleigh. Records say, pending further review, but no review was ever scheduled." Jordan's chest tightened. "Who authorized the transfer?" The clerk shrugged. "Doesn't say, just a name, M. Keene." Jordan froze. The name resonated. He'd seen it scrawled in the corner of one of his mother's notebook pages. Keene, watching? His mind raced. Whoever M. Keene was, he wasn't just a name, he was part of this. And the fact that he'd controlled Camille's car long after her disappearance suggested he had power. Power enough to erase trails. Jordan left the impound lot in a daze, mind spiraling with fresh urgency. The web of connections had tightened, and now Camille's case pointed directly toward the same hidden hand manipulating his family's fate. He had to dig deeper. The time for questions was over. Now he needed names and answers. Jordan barely slept. The connection to Camille Turner's disappearance had jolted his investigation onto a new, far more dangerous path. The name M. Keene gnawed at the edges of his consciousness, a phantom lurking behind erased files and altered timelines. He knew instinctively that this wasn't random. Two families, one pattern, a name that surfaced in his mother's notebook and again in state vehicle transfer records. This was targeted. Someone had been orchestrating events from the shadows. And now Jordan needed to understand exactly what his family had known before they vanished. The cassette tape, Sammy's whispered plea, held clues he'd barely begun to decipher. But the analog hiss and degradation made hearing anything beyond that single line difficult. Determined, George's borrowed equipment from a tech-savvy classmate, Louise, a sound engineering major. Louise welcomed the challenge. They met in the dim confines of the university's old AV lab late that night. Jordan explained the urgency, careful not to reveal too much. Luis connected the battered Walkman to a digital interface, running the tape through high-fidelity conversion software. The waveform appeared on screen, a jagged landscape of noise and hidden voices. Luis adjusted filters, removing background hiss, enhancing mid-range frequencies. After an hour, faint undercurrents began to emerge beneath Sammy's words. Jordan leaned in, heart hammering. Luis frowned. "There's something here," he said, isolating a section mid-tape. "It's heavily compressed, like someone recorded over part of it but didn't wipe it completely." With surgical precision, Luis applied spectral editing, pulling apart layers of sound. Gradually, a voice surfaced, soft, weary, unmistakably female. Jordan's breath caught. His mother. Denise Brown, the voice was strained but deliberate. "If anyone hears this," she said, "please know, we've been followed for weeks. This is not an accident." Luis and Jordan exchanged stunned glances. The recording continued in broken fragments. "We didn't tell anyone, for fear they'd be next. If you're hearing this, we're already too late." The words sent a chill through Jordan's veins. His mother had known. She had tried to leave a warning. The tape clicked, a brief silence following, then the unmistakable sound of the Camry's engine idling, footsteps, faint but present, another voice, deeper, unfamiliar, muffled. Luis worked feverishly to isolate it, but too much of the frequency was lost. The sound shifted again, movement inside the car, hushed breathing. Then Sammy's small voice, barely audible, "Will they know it wasn't Daddy driving?" Jordan's chest constricted. Tears blurred his vision. Sammy had known. She'd seen it happen, and somehow she'd understood the importance of documenting it, even at 9 years old. He gripped the table edge, knuckles white. The tape was more than a child's warning. It was a desperate attempt to tell the truth, preserved beneath layers of static and fear. Luis leaned back, shaken. "Ma'am, this isn't just some random disappearance." Jordan nodded, voice tight. "I know." He copied the digitized file to 2 flash drives, pocketing one. The other he gave to Luis, urging caution. "Don't share this, please." Luis nodded solemnly. Jordan left the lab in a daze, the night air biting against his skin. His mother's voice echoed through him. "If anyone hears this, we've been followed for weeks. Not an accident." And Sammy's innocent question tore at his heart. Will they know it wasn't Daddy driving? Now he knew. And so would anyone who tried to bury the truth. The cold night air couldn't still the storm inside Jordan's mind. His mother's voice haunted him, each word a dagger, a confirmation that their disappearance had been no accident. Sammy's innocent whisper played on repeat. Will they know it wasn't Daddy driving? A question more chilling now that he knew how deep the deception went. The name Keene stood out like a flare in the darkness. He had seen it in his mother's notebook, then again linked to Camille Turner's car. The name had weight, a silent authority that seemed to thread through every hidden corner of this case. Jordan knew he had to learn everything about M. Keene. He spent the next morning buried in public records, scouring municipal databases and court filings. After hours of digging, the pieces began to surface. Miller Keene, age 42 in 2002, former internal affairs investigator with the Durham Police Department. Known for rooting out corruption, highly respected, or at least he had been. In May 2004, just 2 years after the Browns vanished, Keene had abruptly resigned from the force. No formal explanation, no pension claimed. Within weeks, he too had disappeared. No missing persons report was ever filed. His last known address was vacated overnight. Officially, Keene was listed as whereabouts unknown. Jordan's heart pounded. The man in the Polaroid, the man driving the Camry, that had to be Keene. But why would an internal affairs officer orchestrate the disappearance of 2 families? Why hide it? Determined to trace the financial threads, Jordan accessed public property records, hoping they would reveal what the police files had buried. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A dusty audit report from 2002 showed that 3 days after his family vanished, Miller Keene had purchased a parcel of industrial property through a Shell LLC, 817 Mason Street, the old garage where Jordan had found the Polaroid. His stomach dropped. Keene had bought the very lot where the Camry had been taken, where Thompson had seen it, and done so just days after the abduction. This wasn't coincidence. This was control. He cross-referenced the purchase with other transactions. MK Holdings had been used to quietly acquire 3 additional lots around Durham, each one linked to missing persons cases buried in old news clippings. Camille Turner's old rental property was one of them. The pattern was undeniable. Keene had been sanitizing crime scenes through property ownership, erasing evidence under the guise of private transactions. But why? Jordan's pulse raced as he chased the paper trail further. A single name surfaced repeatedly on the notarized documents: Chief Harold Dennison, Keene's former supervisor at Internal Affairs, the same man who had overseen the division that had erased Thompson's report in 2003. Jordan's breath caught. This wasn't just one rogue cop. This was systemic. Network. Keene had been their cleaner, silencing inconvenient cases, burying evidence through property acquisition and intimidation. But something had gone wrong. His sudden resignation, his unexplained disappearance in 2004, it suggested he had discovered something even darker than he had been asked to hide. Jordan leaned back, head spinning. The garage purchase wasn't just opportunistic, it was a deliberate move to suppress any link to his family's car, and now that link was exposed. The digital tape conversion, the Polaroid, the connection to Camille Turner, all of it painted a picture too dangerous to ignore. He compiled his findings into a secure folder, encrypting everything. Then he made 3 copies, one for himself, one for Thompson, and one he would stash off-site. If they came for him next, the truth wouldn't vanish again. Late that night, unable to sleep, Jordan returned to the garage. The building stood in eerie silence, its walls steeped in the ghosts of lost time. He approached the rusted door, flashlight in hand. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memory. In a back office drawer long overlooked, he found an old maintenance log. One entry stood out: May 15th, 2, memory secured, all vehicles removed, no further access without written approval. George's chest tightened. The date was exactly 3 days after his family vanished. The log confirmed what the record suggested: Keene had orchestrated the cover-up from the beginning. As he stood in the darkened room, a single thought crystallized. His family hadn't vanished by accident. They had been targeted, silenced, and buried under layers of official complicity. But now the truth was breaking through, and Jordan wasn't going to let it fade again. If you found this story as haunting as we did, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter of Forgotten Truths. What do you think really happened to the Brown family? And what role did Miller Keene truly play? We'd love to hear your theories. Tell us where you're watching from, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights help us keep these cold cases alive.